Hello and welcome. Welcome to We Make Art. I am your host, artist and creative mentor, Sarah Rockwood, and I am so glad you are here. Today, I want to talk about creative sovereignty. I want to talk to the part of you that's still asking permission. The part that wonders if her art is valid, if it doesn't make money, if it's selfish to want more beauty in your day, if you're even allowed to slow down and listen for what wants to be created. That's a big one. What wants to be created? Not what should be created or what I have to create. What wants to be created. Ooh, yeah, that's one you got to sit with. But before we sit with and unpack, etc., I want to offer as a definition or how I define creative sovereignty. And I think creative sovereignty, or to be creatively sovereign, is to create because you are alive. Not because it's monetized. That's not a word. What word am I going for? Not because it's monetized. There we go. Or if you need approval, or it's what's required. Like, what is the expression of your aliveness? Now, as working professionals and professional artists, and I'm sure some of you listening are, there is a balance there, right? There are times where there is work that we are required to complete because we've been contracted or we've been commissioned to do those works. And yes, they're valid, important, good use of our talents and expression if you feel connected with that. But there is another part of this, of creative sovereignty, of creating just because, of getting quiet with ourselves, with our intuition, with our inner child, like with all the bits and pieces of us, and asking what wants to be created. And having the freedom financially, emotionally, spiritually, physically, to act on that information, on those intuitions, or on that intuned information, whichever works. Well, you know what I'm trying to say. Having the ability to act on that is creative sovereignty, or is an element of creative sovereignty. And, as artists, if you've come up in a sort of school system, like if you've been to school for the arts, or if you've lived in capitalism, we have really, and I laugh because we've all lived in capitalism, we have all been taught to some level that our value is tied to our performance. And I don't just mean performance on stage, or our value is tied to our productivity, our usefulness. Isn't that something we encounter as women all the time? Are you useful? Are you helpful? And I think a core part of creative sovereignty is embracing that your value is intrinsic. You have value. You are here. Guess what? You're full of value. Death, taxes, value. These are the three things that are inevitable in the human experience. And look, I know I'm here with a definition, and I'm, spouting hopefully inspiring words about creative sovereignty. But I'm not going to pretend with you that it is something I have mastered by any stretch. It is It is something I aspire to, for sure. And it is something I come close to. I know I have moments when I come close to it. But unpacking the need to be useful, the need to have my art reward me in money. I don't know a better way to, like, have it be monetizable, to be approved of. I think that's my personal bugaboo in there. The approval to be, because, I came up in theater school. I wanted to be an actor, 8 years old. I was like, acting, done, let's go. And, I spent first 5 years of my career, because it did start at 9, acting and being in a theater company and trying very, very hard to meet the approval of the director, of the production team, and seeking approval is kind of ingrained. And I don't know if you've seen the American Sweethearts, I think that's what it's called, show about the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. It's on Netflix. I really enjoyed it. That's a whole different kind of drag, that kind of over feminized, it's high femme drag, that they do there. I don't think they would call it that, but that's what I came to after watching the show. The constant scrutiny that the quote unquote training camp is literally a minute by minute audition. We find it everywhere. And so I know that it is a lot to ask of myself now at 46 to let that all go and to embrace creative sovereignty, to create because I am alive, to create what my heart is calling for. That's a lot for me to take on. It's a lot for us to take on. It involves so much deprogramming and unlearning. And yet, it can be as simple as seeing something through a window that kind of tugs at you and jotting a few lines in your phone. I think where a turning point for me happened, and this happened just before I got sick, but I wasn't really able to. And if you're wondering, why do you keep talking about being sick? Go back and listen to the episode before this, where I get into that whole journey. I was doing some yoga with my trainer, and he was helping me get into garland pose, which, if you're not familiar, I wasn't. So, I've learned the name of like one yoga pose. The rest of the time, I'm just looking over at him going, okay. He's like, it's warrior. And I'm like, sure. My arms are here. That's all I know. Garland pose is like a very deep squat where your feet are flat on the floor and your tailbone, you sit back and your tailbone goes towards the earth. So you kind of like your thighs and your calves are together in a squat. That's as close as I can. That's my best way of explaining it. And I've found it extremely difficult. I had never been able to get to it. And we were doing different stretches and coming in and out and coming in and out. And finally he was like, okay, and we're going to drop into garland. And I did. And my body released. It released. It was an unbelievably strange sensation. My mind was trying very hard to tell me this was unsafe. Maybe not my mind, my trauma, my CPTSD was like, this is unsafe. And my body was like, oh, there's something here. And my spirit was kind of like, we're very vulnerable right now. But if you just keep breathing, this might start to feel good, because it was a very intense stretch. And I just kind of sat in it, and he's asking me, he's like, how are you feeling? I'm like, very vulnerable, feel like I want to cry, feel like I want to scream, feel like I might throw up, not sure. A lot of stuff happening. He's like, hey, just keep breathing through it. I'm like, you breathe, I'll be here. But we stayed in it, and it didn't feel, I'm not going to say it felt comfortable, but it was an amazing moment of possibility in my body. And it did feel like art making in that moment. It did feel like art to be with myself, to be so present with myself. Did feel like art. And then at the end of the session, he said, it'd be great if you could write something about that. And like, I think he was thinking more of a testimonial. And then I jokingly said, like, yeah, knowing my luck, you'll probably get a poem. And then I went home and wrote a poem. I sat down to write about it, to journal about it, and outpoured this poem. And although I don't think we need to share everything we make to consider it to be valid, it is something that I will share at some point, because it's so encapsulated that moment of change. Oh, maybe that's part of creative sovereignty, is that we give ourselves permission to change and be changed by our art. Not maybe, that is part of creative sovereignty. The ability to be changed and change within our art. Because, you hit on something that works. And it's very easy to keep pumping out what works. It's and it's hard, especially if you're monetizing your art. If something works, it's very tempting to just keep doing that thing. I mean, we've seen it, right? We see it and we see what happens when people want to change. We've seen that with artists all the time. Like, what happens when an artist decides, the thing that pops into my head is when Dylan goes electric. What does the audience do? And finding that connection to self, to stand in that vitriol that people may throw at you and no, I am changed. And the art is changing. The art is changing, and the art has changed, and I am changing with it. And I think there's an extra layer to this for those of us that are or have a history of being very high functioning, of taking care of others, of putting ourselves last on the list. The idea of being creatively sovereign, it is an organic expression. And when we are used to and valued by our ability to produce systematically, I'm trying to think this through. Like, if you're, let me just use my own personal life as an example. Like, when my 30s were spent, like, by day, I was running day-to-day operations for my father's company, because my father had he had a lot of mental health issues, and we retired him. He wasn't listening, but we retired him. But then it required someone to run the business day to day, because it was, we had employees and stuff. So I was doing that by day. And then in the margins of that, or getting up early, I was writing novels. And then in the evenings, I was coaching singers, or doing song doctoring, or producing vocals on albums. And it was a lot of segmentation and productivity. It was a lot of productivity. And I see now, when those habits come up, when I'm inviting the work in, and it is a balancing act of, like, I'm a Capricorn rising, so I like things organized, but I'm a Pisces sun, so I really love the delulu. And we've discussed this before, and I'm an Aries moon, so I'll fight you. It's feeling a project wanting to be brought to the surface and being like, okay, I've now learned that in order to make my nervous system feel safe in that activity, I have to balance the different parts of myself. I've unlearned a lot of behavior from my past career and way of life. I've unpacked a lot of that. However, you live a certain way for so many decades. It is a process. So when I'm embarking on a new project, when I've gotten quiet with myself and asked what wants to be created, when that project bubbles up, when that piece of art, when that work bubbles up, I know that in order for my nervous system to remain safe in that, I need to balance certain parts of myself. As I say, I need to balance the Capricorn rising in me that wants to create a chart on the wall to track progress. And I need to balance the Pisces side of me that's like, you know what? I need to lie down and just sleep in this work of art. And the Aries part of me, the moon, the body that's like, okay, we need to wiggle, we need to move, we need to get some motion happening as we move through this. And getting to that place takes time. And it is a process that is ever evolving. I mean, I'm telling you this now. I'm sure a year from now, the process will have changed. Because the art will have changed me. That is the blessing and the journey of creative sovereignty. That the art changes us. When we get quiet and we listen, the art changes us. And so the art must change, It's like a really positive, I can never say it right, that thing with the snake that's eating its own tail, they're like, sport. I'm not going to try. But you know that image of the snake that eats its own tail? It's like that, but it's like happy and fun. So if what I'm talking about here, these questions that I'm posing, this concept of creative sovereignty that I'm bringing to us here to discuss in this episode, if this is stirring something in you, and I always say this, and because it's really true, the stirring can happen at the two extremes, right? You could be hearing this and going, oh, and the shoulders drop and you're like, yes, this is what I've wanted to hear forever. Or you could be going, what do you mean? I don't like this. And the shoulders go up, right? There are two sides of the coin, of the stirred and stimulated coin. If you're having one of those two reactions, or in the middle, I'm just being dramatic because we're on a podcast. If this is stirring something in you, don't rush to act. Don't put that pressure on yourself, because then we're falling back into the old paradigm. And creative sovereignty is opening, is allowing. Just start to notice where things are opening up, where things feel like they're waking up. What little parts of you do you find in your day where you're going, that's a new thought? Or you catch yourself looking at something in a different way. Or the synchronicities start, where you're thinking about something and then you turn on the radio and it's like the song you were thinking about, or you're having a conversation with someone and they're like, yeah, I really just need to be more creative about it. It's like, whoa, those little synchronicities that kind of make your antenna go. Pay attention to those. Pay attention to those, you know? Just clock them. You don't need to write them down. You don't need to journal them unless you wish to. Just paying attention to that opening up. And if you feel ready, link is in the bio down below. I have an episode in The Art of Return. The Art of Return is my secret podcast. It's totally free, and it's different visualizations. And there's one in there, The Heart of the Rose, that is exactly designed for this conversation. It is the gentle opening to the intuition, to the part of you that is, this is the thing, we can talk about creative sovereignty as a destination, something outside, but it is actually already within us. It's already there. We return to it. We return. This was the major takeaway for me with all of the health issues I had over the winter and this new adventure here with elemental alchemy, was that everything I wanted from my art, from myself, everything, it's already here. Everything you want for yourself and your art is already within you. It's about returning to it. And we do that through rest. And we do that through softness. And we do that through sitting quietly with difficult questions, with challenging questions. If you're ready to begin that journey back to your creative sovereign self, or you want a little tune-up on your creative sovereign self, The Art of Return, and specifically I will recommend The Heart of the Rose, is here for you. And I'll leave you with this before I say goodbye. Well, I'll say goodbye and then leave you this, whatever. You don't owe the world usefulness. You don't. You owe yourself a life that feels like truth. And that all starts with a soft, gentle step back to yourself. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye.